Welcome. In this episode, I am excited to introduce you to Nathan Pichette, a fractional chief marketing officer with a wealth of knowledge and experience helping businesses grow and succeed. Tune in as we dive into Nathan's insights and tips on building better marketing strategies for social media, target audiences, and more. Hi, Nate. Thanks for joining us. So, you said something really interesting when we were talking about creating an effective digital marketing campaign on social media. Can you let me know what is the first step that you look for, that you start off with when creating a digital marketing campaign?
It's really funny. I've seen a lot of campaigns and gone into to start working with new customers, and their campaigns are all over the place. And when I ask them what the purpose of their campaign is, they really don't have an answer for me. They're like, well, we're just trying to, generate some leads. But when we dig into it a little bit more, leads are their only goal. They really don't know what they're trying to communicate with that ad or with that program or campaign. So the first thing I like to do when I'm working with a new client is try to understand what their overall objectives are, right? I want to map out exactly what they're trying to achieve, but also we want to look at who they're trying to speak to. Because maybe you've run into this too. You'll go into a consultation, and the first thing you say is, okay, well, tell me about who your ideal client is. And they'll go, oh, we work with everybody. That doesn't work with a digital campaign, right? It just doesn't work. Like when we try to talk to everybody, we don't really talk to anybody. There's so much noise in these channels, especially social media, that if you have a generic message, they don't even see it. Your audience won't even process it. It looks like every other ad out there. So what we want to do is understand not only what you're trying to achieve, what message you're trying to get across, but who your audience is. And there's more to that than that. Like that whole who your audience part is big. So have you ever seen one of those side-by-side comparisons where they run like the stats of people? Have you seen those?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I saw one recently that kind of just nails this, right? It was male, white, British, age, it goes down the whole thing. They were the exact same, right? The exact same.
Right.
One of them was the newly crowned King of England. The other one was Ozzy Osbourne, right? So that just shows us that if we're thinking about it in terms of some of these demographic markers, that we're missing the point. They're different people. They have unique goals, unique desires, right?
Right.
I'm not going to talk to the King of England the same way that I would talk to Ozzy Osbourne. I probably enjoy talking to Ozzy more personally, right? But they're different people. But if you look at the numbers from an analytics perspective and an audience building perspective, they're the same. So we can talk about they need to earn this amount of money or live in this area or whatever. That to me is like table stakes. That's what you have to know. But what I really want to dig into, besides knowing what you want to achieve, is understand who your audience really is. I think that's key to building anything, is knowing who you're trying to speak to.
I agree. Can you give us some techniques on how you dig into that target audience and how you figure out who they actually are?
Yeah. All right. So let me do this kind of by telling a story. So several years ago, I was working with a startup. They sold into human resources departments, right? So they thought to themselves, okay, they were using that first model, the side-by-side comparisons where everybody's the same. They were looking at title, right? So they saw, okay, we're looking at HR professionals between the ages of 25 and 47 or whatever doesn't mean anything, whatever the stats were, their age group. Working for companies that are between 200 and let's say 1,000 employees. They had the whole thing built out that this was who their audience was.
Right.
And then the creative that they used for that campaign was something that you would see on LinkedIn all the time. It was like a boardroom with smiling faces and the generic stock photos that you'd see of people in a WeWork location, hanging around and doing a brainstorming session, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And they were running this campaign, and it wasn't going anywhere. They were spending a lot of money on it, and I'll tell you the lead cost in this campaign was over $100 a lead. So it took over $100 to convert from impression to form fill through this process, over $100 per lead. Now, the crazy thing is, like, if looking at all the numbers, they weren't too far off of what the benchmarks were. I mean, they were a little high, but it wasn't like they were crazy off. The business B2B leads are just more expensive in general, right? But I bet their CMO at the time that I could help fix it. Problem was, they didn't really understand who their audience was. I made an assumption. I looked at those numbers a little bit closer. I wanted to know who actually made up those HR professionals from 25 to whatever in these companies. And it turns out that the majority of the people identify as female. They were female, all over the place, and the majority lived in big cities. Like, vast majority lived in huge cities. Mm-hmm. So I just looked around and I said, okay, what do these people look like, and what are their behaviors like? And we were in Boston at the time, so it wasn't like I had to go very far. It's like I just go for a walk, or I just talk to people in our office that fit this kind of demographic. Doesn't matter what the title was. Right. I just wanted to know what they were into, right?
Right.
So I made a simple switch, and it changed absolutely everything. I looked at who these people were, and I wanted to connect with them and what they thought was cool and they thought was interesting, not what their title suggested was interesting. So we went from this picture of this boardroom and the happy people, and I made a bet that I could change everything, and I put a picture of a dog. Just a picture of a dog, no joke. Yeah. A picture of a dog, right? And on the picture, no other copy on the picture. It was blank except for 2 words: hey, HR. That's it. That's absolutely it. It was a picture of a really cute dog looking at him kind of sideways with hey, HR. What that did was it helped break through the noise. Because as you're scrolling, I wanted to put something out there that would make them stop just long enough to read the message. Mm-hmm. But also to tell our target audience, this message is for you. That's it. That's the only change that I made. So we went from this business professional thing to a very distinct ad. Distinctiveness is we can get into that later on if we wanted to, but it's one of the cognitive biases that determines behavior, that helps influence behavior, is distinctiveness. Mm-hmm. So I made the ad distinctive. It wasn't like all the other ads that they were going to see. It was something that they would probably see more on like Instagram or Facebook. But I ran the ads on LinkedIn. So it stood out. So where every other company had that smiling business professional in these meetings and everybody laughing and doing the whole thing, all of a sudden they come up with this. It was a pug, right? It was a black pug. It was adorable. But it was like looking sideways and the eyes were in different directions, and it said, hey, HR. It got them to stop just long enough to pay attention to the message. The only reason I knew how to do that was because I looked beyond the statistics. I looked at the behaviors. Before I ran the ad, I went through their office with 2 different creative sets at different times. I did not want to influence their responses. And one of them, I said, hey, do you mind taking a look at this? I'd just love to get your feedback. And it was the standard ad they'd been running. They're like, oh yeah, that looks okay. I'm really busy. Like, people would just brush it off. Right. Like it was nothing that would break through their normal day. Mm-hmm. And then I came by later on with a picture of the pug. And I said, have you seen this thing? Look at how cute this is. And every single one of them was like, oh my God, that thing is so cute. And the reactions were different. Their faces lit up. Instead of looking annoyed that I'd interrupted their day and they had to turn off their Spotify, they like smiled at me and like, oh my God, that is so cute. Are we going to use that? That's crazy. Are we like, we're going to do this? Yeah. And like, it was just enough to capture that audience's attention. We went from over $100 per lead, and we started generating leads for about $4 a lead.
Wow. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like a really successful campaign that you ran. Are there any other themes that make a campaign successful?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we do have to make sure that we have the basic targeting on point. Like it has to be there. Like we have to make sure that and that's the cool part about digital, and especially social, is that it's so easy to reach your exact audience. Yes. It makes it so nice. Where we used to have to like gamble and be like, okay, I'm going to run an ad in the newspaper because the demographics look like they should be. Like you make this huge output and you just cross your fingers and hope it works. Or the same thing with like a magazine or a TV spot. With digital, we're able to like test this stuff in real world with small budgets and really fine tune our audience, which is great. It's great, right? So knowing who that audience is important, but knowing how they behave and what they're looking to get out of what you do is equally important, right?
Right.
So in a B2B setting, I've got to understand the unique challenges that I'm helping them solve. I also have to understand where they fit into the equation. So I think where a lot of companies get, especially their digital stuff, wrong on LinkedIn in particular, and other channels as well, but for like B2B or anything, is that they position themselves as the champion, right? Like we do all this wonderful stuff. Look what we do. Look what we do. Look what we do. And when in reality, what the audience is looking for is for you to help them get to where they want to go. They don't want to be a passenger in this process. They want to be an active participant. It's their story, right?
Right.
So you and I, before we jumped on, we're talking about the Nike "Just Do It" campaign, right? It wasn't buy Nikes because we're the best, and like the whole the "Just Do It" campaign targets people in a way that Nike helps them achieve their own personal goals, right? It's you just do it, not like we do all this stuff and all you have to do is put our shoes on. Like, no, like it's you take that step, you do this or you do that. We'll help you get there. We'll give you the tools you need to reach your maximum performance. But they're empowering people, right? That empowerment is what people are looking for when they're looking at a sporting good company. Somebody who, whether it's shoes or activewear or equipment, they're looking for somebody to help make them better, right? In business, the business tools that companies sell are to help people make their jobs better, right? It's to make you look better for your bosses. It's to solve the problems that you're having at work, whether it's human resources related or cybersecurity related or whatever it is, right? We're not the champions coming in and being like, look at how great we are. We're here to help make their job easier. So understanding how to position that within the campaign is vitally important. Because if we're talking about us, we're missing the mark. Not only are we missing the mark, we're missing our audience.
Yes. That was really good themes there. I love that. I know you said something about looking at the metrics on social and digital. Are there any metrics that are your favorite or that stand out to you that you can tell whether or not a campaign is going to be successful by that metric in particular?
That's a good question, and it's different for every single campaign. If I'm selling consumer goods, purchases ultimately are our final measure of what's been successful, right? Like if I want to make sure that I understand how many times that person has seen our ad. If I'm I think probably that would all depend on where we are within the campaign. So I don't like to think of campaigns as a singular ad that as standalone that just operates, by itself. When I'm talking about campaigns, what I'm really talking about is a strategy to reach people, and there's different parts of that. So I may do a brand awareness campaign as my top level, my first touch, where I'm looking to get people to interact with what I'm doing, what my message, and that drives them to another asset or an asset that we've provided, right? And then I may have a different message that I use for remarketing or retargeting that I push out to the audience that's already expressed interest based on their response to the other ad. So I kind of structure it as like in the awareness stage, I'm not looking at generating leads. That's not the KPI that I'm interested in. I'm looking at, from an awareness side of how many people clicked on this? How did this message resonate with my target audience? Were they the right people, right? That's an important thing to look at. Was it the right people? Were they in the right location? Well, look at all those key things. But for an awareness campaign, I'm just trying to drive action so that I can retarget them. Then on the flip side, for the next layer of it, I may have an entirely new ad that goes out, and that may have a different purpose. Maybe I'm trying to get them to attend a webinar. Maybe I'm trying to get them to look at a product review. Maybe I'm trying to get them to look at it, to view a video, something, maybe access a digital download, something, right? So the metric for that part of it could be different. It's like, which action did they take what was the desired action? Did they take that step? And then ultimately, we want to have at somewhere in the process a conversion metric that we look at. And then ultimately, the success of all the other ones funnel down into that conversion metric. That is, did they make a purchase? Did they book a meeting? Did they sign up for a free trial? Whatever the conversion metric is, that's what I'm looking at ultimately at the bottom of the funnel to determine if the campaign was successful. But the campaign might have 5 or 6 steps, and it could take 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think where a lot of people get it wrong is they look at a campaign and they say, okay, well, I ran a campaign, I did a promotion and nobody responded to it. It's like, well, did they not? Like, did you give it enough time? Was there a purpose behind it? Do you know exactly what you're trying to do?
Did you target the right people?
Yeah, exactly. Did you target the right people? Do you know what your messaging was on? Was your creative on? Like, did you get it right? Are you doing testing, right? Did you try a different channel? Maybe you're on the wrong channel. Sometimes, like what we do on LinkedIn doesn't work on Facebook, or doesn't work on Instagram, or like there's a communication style for each one of these platforms. Did we use the right style?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot that goes into this. But what I find is that most companies and most businesses don't give their campaigns enough thought in the planning process. They just run ads and then they look at the responses from the ads, whether it's clicks or downloads or lead generation or purchases, and they look at it as that's in a single event, and they determine whether or not the campaign was successful. And that's not how people behave these days.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit, or you just talked a little bit about style and how to use that throughout different platforms. And with style goes content. So, what kind of content do you like to post, and where do you like to post it?
That's a very good question. As somebody obviously with a ton of style, this is an important thing for me.
Yes, for sure.
No, I'm kidding, but no, like, style is important, but there are ways to break through. And when we talked about the dog thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were looking at LinkedIn and the style of LinkedIn, it was something that's unfamiliar to LinkedIn. It was distinctive, right? So if we think about being seen, distinctiveness sells. So when we talk about style, if we're just matching the style, we want to. It's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Like, there's a lot to this. You don't want to be so distinct that you do something that's inappropriate for the channel, but you want to be distinctive enough in the creative and messaging and whatnot to stand out, and that can be a delicate balance. I personally work a lot with businesses who sell to businesses. That is their client. That's who I typically help. Early stage startups, technology companies. These are kind of like my sweet spot of the customers that I work with. So LinkedIn for me is the first place that I go, not because it's my favorite platform. I don't really have a preference, but because the tools that I'm able to target or use to build my target audience are there. I have access to data that I don't have on Facebook.
Right.
But what I like to do is take that signal, take that audience, and then retarget them on other platforms. And that's where you can be a little bit more distinctive, where you can stand out a little bit more. So there's no great answer to that. I would say that if your stuff looks like everybody else's, you're camouflaging it. Nobody's going to see it.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about retargeting. Can you explain kind of what that is to you and how you actually do that?
Well, yeah, retargeting is changing and rapidly changing. Privacy regulations, privacy laws, the new G4. It's like there's so much that's going on that's changing the way, or our access to data. Back in the old days, we could use any third party we wanted, and then Cambridge Analytics got messed up in a presidential election and started selling off data and retargeting. Like, we started paying closer attention to how we use our data and data privacy at that time. In Europe, you have GDPR. There were just a massive penalty that came down against, I believe it was Facebook, where they were storing data in the United States that wasn't allowed to be stored. And I mean, it was like it was a massive fine.
Yeah.
A number that I don't remember, but I think it started with a B. Like, like a lot of money, right? So we have to be really careful how we retarget. One thing that I would say is that when the data becomes yours, it becomes first party instead of third party. So people who have visited your website, you're still able to retarget them using Google Display because they visited your website, right? Same thing like on LinkedIn. You're able to retarget people on LinkedIn who have interacted with your stuff on LinkedIn, or people who have, if it stays on platform, it's first party data. Right now, there isn't really a huge issue with that. It's where you start getting cross-platform becomes an issue. But the idea of retargeting is that you take people who have already responded in some way to one of your ads or your content. They've already expressed interest in what you do, and then you continue to drip messages on them in other places to get them to pay attention again, to re-engage with you, right? You've probably seen, like, if you've ever looked for a car, you've probably found that immediately afterwards, on every site that you're going to that's connected to the Google Display Network, if you searched it up on Chrome, now you're getting ads on every single campaign for cars, in every single platform, like campaigns on every single platform for cars, right?
Right.
That's retargeting. It's companies saying, listen, we want to put our message in front of people who have already had an expressed interest in the services or goods that we offer. The best thing to do, especially if you have a limited budget, is get to those minimum thresholds for retargeting, spend just enough money to get an audience built, and then spend the majority of your money trying to re-engage people who have already expressed interest. That's where we see the highest return. On platforms like LinkedIn, typically LinkedIn has a negative ROI for an initial awareness campaign. If you spend $1,000 on LinkedIn, it's going to be hard for you to recoup $1,000.
Wow.
But you spend $1,000 to build your audience and identify your audience, and then you take another $1,000 and you use that to retarget your message. That's where the positive ROI comes in. And the better your data set gets and the better you get at this, the higher return you're going to get. So when I hear people say, I've tried social ads and they just don't work, my first question is, talk to me about how you set those campaigns up. What was your strategy, and did you use retargeting?
Those are really good questions to ask and good things to look for. So with retargeting, does that happen throughout the campaign, or is that kind of like an end step or in the middle step? Where is that being placed throughout the campaign?
My personal belief and where I've seen success from my customers is that retargeting or remarketing should be done for your existing prospects, your existing customers, and your past customers. So retargeting is the way that you utilize your data, right? So let's say I had an email list can get burnt out after time. You may send emails, it's going to spam or it's getting flagged. Open rates go down, whatever it may be. There's a lot of health exercises people need to do within their email list. Typically, email lists are usually burnt out at least a little bit, and the rate of return on emails is going down, right? It's just evolution of consumer behavior. We get a lot of spam emails, right? So I may take that email list that I've generated, and instead of sending it to sending them another email, I may pump that list into a social campaign and use that as my targeting data, and then tell those companies, look, this is who I want to reach, or these are my website visitors, these are the people that I want to reach, and that may be how I try to get the message back in front of them. So I think retargeting is used, retargeting or remarketing is used at all times. I think it's an incredibly important thing to just build into your long-term strategy. What I like to do for new customers, and I think that's where we talk about, a lot of people focus their marketing on new customers.
Mhm.
They shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. But they do it anyway, especially if they don't have any existing customers. Um, so what I would do is I would set aside a portion of your budget at the top level, and that would be my awareness bucket. So everything that I do in that, with that budget, those campaigns, the ads, everything would be to get people's actions, to drive people to my website, to an asset, to get people to interact with what I'm putting, my message, what I'm putting out there. And then the majority of my money I would spend, getting my message back in front of them. That's just that audience. I think it's absolutely vital, and where most companies miss out.
What are some other vital things to look out for whenever we're creating campaigns or whenever you are creating campaigns? What are some of those vital things that you must have?
I call it fool's gold. It's the KPIs and the actions that don't mean anything to you. I'll give you a great example. Recently, I was working with a company and we did this amazing webinar series, awesome webinar series. It was Neil Patel was the guest, which is really cool.
Nice.
Like really, really cool. Well, that's a name that's going to drive a lot of action, right? Like a lot of
Yes.
action. Okay. So we did a few different things, and we put some messages out. One of them was to an affinity audience through Google Display. We built ads, and they were banner ads and Google Display. We didn't do search because they're not pulling it, but we wanted to like get that banner up a lot, like you'd see like a new movie coming out, or like click here to get blah blah blah. Anyway, we drove a ton of traffic on this thing, a ton of traffic, a ton. We're talking like for very little money, tens of thousands of clicks, like incredible. You'd think that was a success. It wasn't, because it ran for months. We didn't see a dramatic increase in any activity on the landing page. Like they were clicking just to click, and then when it like bounced quickly. So we did a ton of like testing with the landing pages and whatnot. Truth is, it was the wrong audience, because the conversation was very focused on a single topic for a single audience, but we didn't have the ability through Google's platform to target the exact audience that we were trying to reach. It was a very specialized message. So they click on it, they realize it wasn't for them, and then they bounce. We wanted them to bounce. We didn't want to like have all this fake traffic.
Yeah.
But what we found was that even though we were able to generate thousands of clicks, like crazy amounts of clicks for a very, very low dollar spend, they didn't really mean anything. So when I look at, I think the question was around like, what do you look at around success metrics?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what I'm looking at is not just the vanity stats or the fool's goal. I'm looking at the things that actually drive action that I'm asking them to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't drive action, then it's not worth it. It doesn't matter how cheap it is or how great the numbers are. If it's not who we're trying to reach, all it's going to do is eat up your budget. It doesn't matter how cheap it is. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, we were talking the other day, and he said, most marketing agencies will get you to advertise yourself right out of business. And when you think about that for a second, you can advertise yourself right out of business if you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side, if you're doing it right and you're applying some of these principles, like really good targeting, creative that stands out, messages that resonate, not for your company, but for your customers. Like if you're helping to empower them, then it changes. And what you used to just be a marketing expense now becomes a business driver, and you start generating revenue out of it. And that's where the magic happens. So I like to avoid all of those vanity metrics like clicks or cost per click. I would take $1,000 cost per click on a campaign that generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, as opposed to a click that's going to cost me $1 and generate me nothing. Which one's more expensive?
So on social, some of those vanity metrics are like likes and what else?
I wouldn't say they're all vanity metrics. It's how you use them. I'm not going to report a like as look at how many people liked our ad. What I am going to do is this is somebody who took an action. Now we can put them into our retargeting bucket. Mm-hmm. And we have a chance to convert them later on in the process. That's the way I would look at that. You got to be careful in how you look at some of these things. They have different meaning. What we want to do is kind of get an idea, and sometimes we're guessing, but we want to take a look at intent. I think is the big thing. What kind of intent can we get out of these actions?
Yeah, and I think that the thing too about digital and social is it's easy. It's a little bit easier to test things out. So even if it's not right the first time, it's good to, you can switch things up and try again.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but a baseball fan, if you bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like that's a good, like you fail 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
Like that's a good thing. I don't think marketers are that good. I think we fail way more than we succeed. Mm-hmm. So you're right. Like testing small is really important because not everything we're going to do is going to be a home run. I mean, we really do have to test it out. And I've failed way more often than I ever win. Mm-hmm. But it's trying to find those winners. There was a guy, the founder of WordStream. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Big marketing and marketing analytics company. They like do all like the WordStream benchmarks for social ad costs. Have you ever? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw him speak at a HubSpot event one time, and he branded them donkeys and unicorns. He goes, most of what we do is working with donkeys. He goes, they're just a bunch of, they're just donkeys. He goes, it's our job to find the unicorns out of the work that we do. He goes, every once in a while we get a unicorn. He goes, and it's our job to ignore the donkeys and be able to move on quickly and focus on the unicorns. And I always thought that was really funny because it's true. Like we spend so much time working with campaigns or ideas that just for whatever reason don't work. And we don't allow ourselves to get to the ones that could be magical. And what we're really looking to do is find that magical moment where the message, the audience, the time, everything, the offer, it all makes sense and it starts to work. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I love that quote. What are some other traits and abilities and skills that you think create a successful marketer?
Successful marketer. Problem solving. Everything we do is solving a problem. Mm-hmm. It's all like putting together a big puzzle. And whether you're good with the data, great with creative, if you're a fantastic copywriter, these are all really important skills to have. It's good to know. But each one of those is just a little puzzle piece. If you're great with a MarTech stack, that doesn't mean you're going to be awesome working and managing an agency, a creative agency. True. Just means that you're awesome with marketing technology. Yeah. Or if you're great with reporting and you data insights and you're able to really dig into this thing, doesn't mean you're a great copywriter. So I would say for marketing leaders, it's having a really good understanding of how all these things work together and then being able to put the pieces together in a way that can solve the problem. That to me makes a great marketing leader. Other roles in marketing, and there's a lot of different roles. We talk about marketers and it's like this catch-all. It's not. There's a ton of things that you can do in marketing. It's understanding and owning your space, being confident in that, and then I'd say constant learning. If you're not curious in marketing, you probably need to go do something else.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So last question I have for you.
Okay.
Is I know there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of information out there. Mm-hmm. What are some of the tools or techniques that you use to keep up to date with marketing trends going on? What's new in the marketing?
Okay. Some of my favorite things to follow are podcasts. Love
I
podcasts, and there's some
love
good ones
that.
out there. There's some really good, and the cool thing about podcasts is that it feels like you're listening into a conversation that's meant for you, right?
Mhm.
So Phil Agnew has one that's on the HubSpot network. It's called Nudge, the Nudge podcast. I'm obsessed with it. It it's really really good. I highly recommend it. It it's about cognitive biases and how it impacts our behavior and decision making.
Mm.
And he draws really heavily on a book called Nudge, another book called The Choice Factory by Schotten, um, which is 25. I actually got it right here. 25 behavioral biases that influence what we buy. So it's that part of it, like that learning part of it, that I love listening to the people who have experience testing out campaigns and managing campaigns that apply some of these principles. Because I'm obsessed with getting people to take action. That's what my job is as a marketer.
Yeah.
It's the number one job of a marketer is to make sales easier. That's I believe is the number one job. The way we do that is we get people to take actions. So understanding how people behave is super important to me. So all the
Mhm.
stuff that I'm learning about right now, all the people that I'm following, everything I'm doing is around um, cognitive behavior, and I think it's super important, and not enough companies are paying attention to it.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. Yeah,
So yeah,
I
just
don't.
go look at the Nudge podcast. You can find it on Spotify or anything like that. There's my commercial for somebody else right now.
You
But
need to be
I
a brand
like
ambassador.
yeah, exactly. I should probably do that. No, but some of these things like I love the Choice Factory. I love Nudge. I love stuff like that. Just once you like look at one of them, you'll start getting suggestions and just finding new things. And that's how I've done it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining
It is my
and
pleasure.
sharing all of your knowledge with us today. I really appreciate having you.
It was a pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.